Have you ever been stabbed in the back by the very person you trusted the most? Not an enemy, not a stranger, but someone who once held your secrets, knew your pain, and looked you in the eyes like they'd never turn on you. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt, it shatters something deep inside. Because it's not the act itself that breaks you, it's the fact that it came from them. The one person you never thought would. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't come from across the battlefield. It comes from beside you when your guard is down, when your heart is open. When you've given someone the map to destroy you, and they use it. And what's worse, you blame yourself. You replay every moment, asking what signs you missed, what you could have done differently. But the truth is, betrayal isn't about you being weak. It's about them seeing your strength, your light, your rise, and deciding they wanted it for themselves. The people closest to you know where you're most vulnerable, not because you're foolish, but because that's what closeness requires. Trust, openness, connection. And when that trust is weaponized, it leaves scars far deeper than any wound an enemy could cause. Betrayal by someone close is not just an attack, it's a collapse of faith, of belief, of identity. You start to question not only them but yourself, your judgment, your worth, your ability to ever trust again. But here's what you need to understand. Betrayal isn't proof that you were naive. It's proof that you were courageous, that you dared to trust, that you dared to build, that you gave someone a seat at your table when you could have eaten alone. And while they may have poisoned the meal, they didn't poison your future. That power still belongs to you, and it always will. If you've been betrayed, you're not broken, you're awakening. Because in that pain, there's a brutal kind of clarity. You start to see people for who they are. You start to protect your energy. You stop romanticizing loyalty from people who've only ever shown you convenience. And most importantly, you stop begging for understanding and start building resilience. This is not the end of your story. It's the cutting away of dead weight. It's the moment you stop confusing proximity with loyalty, blood with bond, words with truth. And when you do, you rise, sharper, smarter, stronger. You don't become cold, you become clear, because the ones who betrayed you didn't win. They exposed themselves, and now you're free from the illusion they wrapped themselves in. Stay with this message until the end, because by the time this is over, you won't just understand betrayal, you'll use it. You'll weaponize the pain they tried to drown you in, and you'll turn it into power they can't even comprehend. The betrayal that tried to break you will become the force that builds you. The closer they are, the more dangerous they become. Not because they hate you, but because they have access. Access to your time, your thoughts, your routines. Access to your fears, your ambitions, your blind spot. And with that access comes power. Power to influence, power to manipulate. Power to sabotage you from within while still wearing the mask of support. That's the cruel irony of betrayal. It doesn't always come from malice. It often comes from proximity, from familiarity, from someone you once saw as safe. When someone is close to you, they don't have to break in. They're already inside. Inside your circle, inside your trust, inside your mind. And if they ever decide to turn, they don't need to attack you like an enemy would. They just quietly rearrange the wires from the inside. A subtle doubt here, a delayed response there, a missing word of support when you needed it most. It's soft, it's slow, it's silent, but it kills just the same. You must understand that people closest to you aren't always rooting for your rise. Some are only comfortable with you as long as you don't outgrow them, as long as your wins don't make their insecurities louder. As long as you stay small enough to not threaten their self-image. And when you start breaking limits they still cling to, that admiration can turn into resentment. That support can turn into subtle sabotage. Because your evolution reminds them of their stagnation, and they hate the mirror you've become. Not everyone near you wants to see you shine. Some just want to stand close enough to your light to appear lit without ever building their own fire. And when you finally step into your full power, they panic. Because now you're no longer controllable. Now you're no longer dependent on their approval. Now your confidence exposes their comfort zone. And that's when betrayal happens. Not because you did something wrong, but because you dared to become more. You have to stop mistaking closeness for alignment. Just because someone has history with you doesn't mean they have your future in mind. Some people were only meant to walk with you through certain seasons, and the longer you drag them into your next chapter, the more damage they can do. It's not always betrayal from the start, But envy grows in silence, and when left unchecked, it will rot the foundation from beneath your feet. You don't need to live in fear, but you do need to live with awareness. The same way you lock your doors at night, you must lock your spirit from those who can't celebrate your growth. Keep your heart open, but your eyes sharper. Give your energy to those who match your vision, not just your memories. Because betrayal from the closest ones isn't rare, it's predictable. And once you see the pattern, you're no longer a victim of it. You're a master of your space, and no one slips through your gates unnoticed again. Familiarity is a double-edged sword. It breeds comfort, but it also breeds contempt. The more people see you up close, the easier it becomes for them to dismiss your growth, to minimize your effort, to strip the shine from your success. Not because they truly know you, but because they think they do. They've seen your bad days, your doubts, your flaws. And in their mind, that gives them permission to reduce your value. They forget that struggle doesn't cancel strength. That vulnerability isn't weakness. That just because you came from the same place doesn't mean you're staying there. People closest to you start to believe they've outgrown your growth. They remember who you were and use it to deny who you're becoming. And that denial turns into quiet envy, into cold detachment, into whispered betrayal. They don't need to scream to sabotage. All it takes is doubt behind your back, silence when you speak, or comfort with your failure. That's the betrayal most people miss, not a dramatic act, but a consistent absence of support. Jealousy doesn't always look like hate. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, behind fake praise, behind small jokes that cut a little too deep. They're not rooting for you. They're tolerating your success, and when your ambition threatens their identity, betrayal becomes a method of survival. If they can't rise with you, they'll try to pull you back. Not because they truly want to hurt you, but because your rise exposes their refusal to rise themselves. You have to understand that proximity doesn't equal purity. People don't turn on you out of nowhere. The seeds are planted long before you notice. Every comparison, every moment they feel left behind, every time your win reminds them of a goal they gave up on. These seeds grow in silence until one day they act. And you're left wondering what changed, when in truth, nothing changed. You just finally rose high enough to trigger what was already buried deep inside them. There's nothing wrong with being seen, but there's everything wrong with being seen by the wrong people. When someone knows your entire journey but still refuses to honor your evolution, they are not your ally. They are a ticking clock waiting to become your lesson. You cannot grow freely in a space that resents your growth. And you cannot keep handing access to those who only respect your struggle but fear your success. This is the shift. Stop trying to prove your worth to those who've already decided not to see it. Stop making yourself small to keep others comfortable. Stop assuming closeness means loyalty. Instead, build your circle with discernment. Watch how they react when you win. Listen for the silence when you speak your dreams. And most of all, trust the energy, not the history, because history can lie, but energy never does. And once you learn to read it, you'll never be blindsided again. You'll rise without apology. And those who can't handle it will remove themselves, just like they were always meant to. Loyalty is not a given. It's not automatic just because someone is close, familiar, or smiling in your direction. Real loyalty is rare, and Machiavelli understood why. He saw that most people are loyal only when it serves them, when your rise benefits their comfort, when your power doesn't threaten their position. But when the balance shifts, when your success begins to outshine their self-image, loyalty turns fragile, conditional, calculated. It breaks not with force, but with quiet convenience. People stay loyal as long as they feel there's something in it for them. The moment you stop being useful, controllable, or manageable, many will shift. Not because they suddenly hate you, but because their priorities were never about you. They were about what you represented: status, safety, opportunity. Once that shifts, so does their allegiance. What feels like betrayal is often just the unveiling of a truth that was always there. The illusion ends, and you're left staring at a reality you didn't want to see. That's why you can't build your foundation on emotion alone. You can't expect unwavering loyalty from those who haven't proven their principles under pressure. When people are tested, when power, money, status, or advantage are on the line, their real character emerges. That's when loyalty is no longer a word but a decision. And most won't choose you. they'll choose themselves, not because they're evil, but because self-interest is the default setting of most human behavior. Machiavelli didn't teach bitterness, he taught clarity. He warned that expecting blind loyalty in a world driven by self-preservation is a mistake. That doesn't mean you shut everyone out. It means you stop assuming intentions. You start observing actions. You stop rewarding proximity. You start rewarding proven alignment. Words are cheap. Consistency is not. And loyalty that survives when there's nothing to gain from you, that is real. Anything less is a risk waiting to surface. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from someone you believed in, but that belief was often based on hope, not truth. You wanted them to be solid. You needed them to be safe, but hope is not evidence. And giving the wrong person a permanent place in your life based on temporary behavior is how trust turns into a weapon. Stop romanticizing connections. Start vetting them. Start testing intentions. Watch how people act when you have nothing to offer. Watch who stays silent when you're being doubted. Watch who disappears when you start elevating. There's power in facing the truth. Most people are loyal to their needs, not your name. Once you stop resisting that, you stop being shocked when people shift, you stop feeling crushed when they walk away, you start making room for those who don't need a reason to stay loyal. Because loyalty is who they are, not what they calculate. And when your circle is built on truth, not illusion, betrayal loses its sting. Because it can't reach you, you're no longer depending on hope. You're anchored in reality. And reality always wins. Every relationship is a silent agreement. A contract that's never spoken out loud, but always active in the background. People give based on what they expect to get. Attention, validation, access, opportunity. These exchanges feel natural until one person outgrows the contract, until one person no longer needs what the other was offering. That's when the agreement breaks. That's when the betrayal begins. Not because something new happened, but because the old balance no longer works. And instead of adjusting with you, they attack you. Most people won't tell you this. They'll pretend loyalty is unconditional, that love is selfless. But the truth is harsher. Most loyalty is transactional. It lives as long as the benefits do. The second your growth stops serving them, the second your strength makes them feel smaller, they begin to recalculate. And if betrayal brings them more comfort, more gain, or more relevance, they will choose it. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, silently, and strategically. Because betrayal doesn't always come from hate. Sometimes it comes from unmet expectations. People don't betray you because you failed them. They betray you because you changed the deal. You elevated, you shifted, you became someone they could no longer control, predict, or use. And in doing so, you became a threat to the version of the relationship they had designed. You stopped being their reflection. You became their reminder, a reminder of the dreams they quit on, the chances they didn't take, the discipline they abandoned. And people would rather destroy the reminder than face their regret. When you start rising, you're not just climbing, you're revealing. You show the real motivations of the people around you, who's cheering genuinely, who's clapping out of habit, who's smiling while plotting your fall. Elevation exposes character. That's why the higher you go, the smaller your circle must become. Not out of fear, but out of necessity. Because most people weren't built to walk with you past a certain point. They were only equipped for your beginning, not your becoming. This isn't about building walls. It's about building standards. It's about recognizing that betrayal doesn't always look like a knife. Sometimes it looks like distance, like silence, like support that vanishes when the spotlight hits you. Sometimes it looks like people who only show up when they need something, who love your old self but resent your evolution, who agreed to walk with you as long as you stayed behind the line they drew. You are not here to carry expired contracts. You are not responsible for keeping people comfortable at the cost of your potential. Let them leave if they must. Let them betray if they choose. Because their actions reveal the truth, and the truth frees you. Every betrayal is a cleared space, a revealed face, a sign that you're stepping into a level not everyone was meant to access. And once you stop mourning those who broke the contract, you'll start protecting the energy that honors your future. And that changes everything. Betrayal doesn't require malice, it requires access. And the ones who betray you aren't always moved by hatred. They're moved by opportunity. They don't need to scream, argue, or declare war. They just need a moment where turning on you feels more beneficial than standing beside you. That moment comes quietly, when your elevation no longer serves their narrative, when your presence begins to threaten the image they've built of themselves. And in that quiet calculation, they choose to defect. Not because they want to see you fall, but because they want to rise in your absence. It's easy to believe betrayal comes from emotion, but more often it comes from logic, cold, mechanical logic. Someone looked at their position next to you and decided they'd be better off somewhere else. They did the math, they weighed the risks, and they chose to cross the line, not in rage, but in silence. This is what makes betrayal so devastating. It wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. They used what they knew, what you shared, what you trusted them with, and they used it to move forward without you. This is where most people break. They take it personally. They internalize the betrayal as proof that something's wrong with them, that they were too open, too trusting, too soft. But it's not about being soft, it's about being unprepared. Because trust without filters is not strength, it's exposure. You cannot give people full access to your life without also giving them the power to destroy it. And not everyone earns that right. Not everyone deserves that level of access. You have to see betrayal for what it is. Not an act of hate, but an act of hierarchy. It's someone repositioning themselves at your expense. And once you understand that, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. You stop begging for closure from people who planned your exit. You stop explaining yourself to people who already chose the lie. You stop handing over the keys to your peace just to keep a seat filled at your table. Power is not about domination. It's about discretion. It's about who you allow close, who you allow into your mind, your plans, your heart. And once you recognize that betrayal requires proximity, you start managing your space with more precision. You stop confusing kindness with access. You stop thinking history equals loyalty. You start seeing people not for how they make you feel, but for how they move when you're not looking. Because their silence speaks, their hesitation reveals, their patterns are always writing a story, and that story will tell you exactly who they are. Let go of the need to be liked. Let go of the illusion that loyalty is permanent. What matters is not who starts with you, but who stays solid when everything shifts. You don't need more people. You need fewer who mean more. And when you move with that clarity, betrayal stops feeling like loss and starts becoming the greatest filter you'll ever know. You never saw it coming because betrayal wears a mask. It doesn't knock on your door dressed as an enemy. It walks in smiling, familiar, warm. It laughs with you, eats with you, learns your rhythms, memorizes your language. And while you're busy being open, it's busy observing, calculating, preparing. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't need force. It uses familiarity. It uses trust. It uses everything you willingly gave and then turns it against you when you least expect it. They didn't betray you because they hated you. They betrayed you because they envied something they couldn't admit. Your resilience, your growth, your refusal to stay stagnant. They didn't say it out loud, but your presence made them uncomfortable. Your rise disrupted their excuses. Your ambition reminded them of their apathy. And rather than confront themselves, they turned on you. Not because they're evil, but because they were weak. And weakness hides behind smiles until strength threatens to expose it. You can't afford to ignore what's behind the mask. Because every betrayal started with a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, a compliment with too much weight, a silence that lasted just a little too long. These aren't coincidences, they're signs. Signals that something underneath is shifting. That someone you trust is slowly rewriting the story you believed you shared. And if you don't pay attention, you'll keep calling it love long after it's turned into resentment. This isn't paranoia. This is perception. This is knowing that while you give people grace, you don't give them blind access. That while you stay open-hearted, you stay sharp-eyed. Because protection doesn't mean isolation. It means discernment. And discernment is what keeps your soul safe in a world where masks are normal and motives are hidden. The more you grow, the more you'll be surrounded by people wearing roles, not revealing truths. And it's your job to see the difference. There is no freedom in naivety. There is no power in pretending everyone near you means well. The world doesn't reward softness without boundaries. It rewards clarity, awareness, strength paired with restraint. You can still love. You can still lead. But you must do so with your eyes wide open. Because once you've been betrayed, you gain a new responsibility, not to stay bitter, but to stay awake. To never again confuse history with loyalty, closeness with care, or words with proof. When you learn to read energy, you no longer need explanations. You feel it in the pauses, in the absence, in the weight of unspoken truths, and once you recognize the mask, you take back your power. You stop being surprised. You stop being hurt. You start acting from truth, not illusion. And that's when you rise untouchable. Shoot. Betrayal can only break the version of you that needed approval. But the version that sees clearly, that version becomes unstoppable. That version builds a life no mask can enter and no lie can shake. To protect yourself, you must first understand the mind of the betrayer. Not from a place of hate, but from a place of power, because when you see what drives them, you stop being blindsided by their moves. You begin to anticipate. You begin to navigate with intention instead of emotion. Betrayers don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as survivors. In their mind, their betrayal is not betrayal. It's strategy, a necessary step to secure their position, protect their ego, or gain an advantage. You are simply the collateral damage in their plan for self-preservation. They rewrite the story in their head long before they act. They tell themselves you wouldn't have brought them along, that you're becoming arrogant, that you changed. And in that narrative, their disloyalty becomes justified. It becomes logical. They convince themselves that if they don't move first, they'll be left behind. And so they betray not because you failed them, but because they fear being forgotten, overpowered, or left irrelevant. Their loyalty was always tied to control. And the moment they lost it, they chose betrayal to reclaim a false sense of power. This is where your strength is forged. Not in being cold, but in being conscious. You must stop believing that betrayal only comes from cruelty. It often comes from fear, from insecurity, from weakness masked as confidence. And once you understand that, you detach. You stop internalizing the act. You stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, what did they fear about me? Because fear is the real trigger. Your strength exposed their doubt. Your growth triggered their insecurity. Your presence made them feel invisible. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable for those who don't want to see themselves clearly. The betrayer doesn't want your destruction. They want your power, just without you in the way. That's why they mimic your steps, study your mindset, and try to duplicate your moves even after they leave. They didn't walk away because you weren't enough. They walked away because being next to you reminded them of everything they refused to become. When you rise above this awareness, you stop playing defense. You stop reacting to betrayal with pain and start responding with precision. You don't beg, plead, or explain. You adjust. You upgrade your standards. You protect your peace. And most of all, you stop shrinking to avoid triggering the insecure. You don't owe anyone comfort at the cost of your calling. Let them feel whatever they feel. Let them do whatever they must. You don't rise to prove anything. You rise because you were built to, because your purpose is louder than their betrayal, and because the higher you go, the less their noise reaches you. This is how power is built, quietly, internally, through awareness, through control, through restraint. Not by fighting betrayal, but by mastering yourself in the face of it. That's the level no betrayer can touch. When you finally see the truth, the next step is to armor your life, not with walls, but with wisdom. You don't need to isolate yourself. You need to become selective. You need to protect your space with the same discipline you use to protect your dreams. Because the cost of letting the wrong person too close is never just emotional, it's spiritual. Betrayal doesn't only break trust, it slows momentum. It drains energy, it steals focus. And in a world that demands every ounce of your potential, you cannot afford that kind of leak. You are not paranoid for being cautious. You are not heartless for setting boundaries. You are not bitter for learning from what cut you. You are evolving. You are stepping into the version of yourself that doesn't move out of emotion, but out of intention. You don't let everyone in. You don't overshare. You don't apologize for being harder to reach. Because access is currency, and the more valuable you become, the more protected that access must be. Armor doesn't mean coldness. It means clarity. It means knowing who pours into you and who pulls from you, who uplifts your vision and who subtly dims your light. The more you grow, the more dangerous it becomes to let unqualified people too close. Not because they'll always hurt you, but because they often can't handle you. Ooh. Your ambition makes them question their comfort. Your discipline exposes their excuses. Your vision threatens the lies they've made peace with, and that discomfort turns to resistance. That resistance turns to resentment, and eventually resentment becomes betrayal. You don't fight this with anger. You fight it with order. You restructure your environment, grade your circle, you operate on truth, not emotion. You start treating your peace as sacred and your time as limited. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to let people go without explanation. Because anyone who respects your value won't need a warning to treat it well, and anyone who needs a warning was never meant to stay. This is the mindset that separates leaders from followers, builders from bystanders. You don't move to be liked, you move to protect purpose. No, you stop trying to save people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop inviting people into rooms they haven't earned. You don't do it out of arrogance. You do it out of necessity. Because your mission is too important to be slowed by betrayal disguised as loyalty. You are allowed to grow without guilt. You are allowed to protect your future without explaining your past. You are allowed to choose solitude over sabotage. And you are allowed to become someone that not everyone understands. That's not disloyalty. That's discipline. That's the strength that betrayal was meant to teach you, not to close your heart, but to close the doors that once led to destruction. And once you do that, your life becomes impenetrable. Not because betrayal doesn't exist, but because you no longer give it a place to hide. You rise from betrayal not by pretending it didn't happen, but by turning its pain into precision. You take the fragments they left you with and you sharpen them into focus. You let every lie teach you to read people faster. You let every silence teach you who's truly present. You let every false hand teach you to trust your instincts over their words. Betrayal wasn't the end of your strength. It was the beginning of your awakening. The moment you stopped living based on assumptions and started moving from truth, you will never be the same. And that's the point. You were never meant to stay soft in all the wrong places. You were meant to refine, to evolve, to learn how to protect your peace without losing your empathy, how to build high walls around your purpose and still lead with power, presence, and poise. Because strength isn't just what you carry. It's what you refuse to carry any longer. And carrying broken trust, carrying unhealed wounds, carrying guilt for other people's choices will only weigh down your future. They showed you who they were. Now show yourself who you are. You are not the betrayal. You are not the wound. You are the one who kept going, who stood back up, who chose not to let their weakness define your worth. You are the one who refused to shrink, refused to retaliate, refused to become what hurt you. That's power. Not reaction, but redirection. Not chaos, but clarity. That's the moment your mindset shifts from victimhood to dominance. Not dominance over others, but over yourself. You begin to speak less and observe more. You begin to trust less by history and more by consistency. You begin to give access based on energy, not just emotion. You no longer argue with disloyalty. You replace it. You no longer explain your standards. You enforce them. You no longer chase closure. You create it. And the ones who truly see you, the ones aligned with your vision, won't be intimidated by your growth. They'll rise with you. They'll guard your name in rooms you're not in. They'll speak life over your dreams when you start to doubt. Those are the ones you build with. Those are the ones you pour into. Let the betrayal refine you. Let it clean out what was never meant to stay. Let it teach you how to move like the person you're becoming, not the person who was wounded. Because the one who was betrayed is not the one who will lead the next chapter. That version of you was necessary for your awakening, but it's the new you, the sharper you, the wiser you, the unapologetically focused you. That's about to take everything to the next level. This is your transformation. This is the rise after the cut, the silence after the storm, the calm of someone who's no longer afraid of being alone because now you know your own power and you never needed their loyalty to own it. There is nothing more powerful than a person who's been betrayed and still refuses to break up. Not because they're numb, but because they've decided to rise with awareness, not anger. They've learned to separate emotion from strategy. To feel everything, but obey nothing that weakens their discipline. That kind of strength doesn't scream. It moves in silence, with purpose, with clarity. with an unshakable presence that can't be manipulated anymore. Because when you've been cut by the closest, you stop reaching blindly for hands. You learn to stand on your own, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. They wanted to see you fall apart. They expected you to fold. But you didn't. You rebuild piece by piece with a fire they didn't expect to ignite. That's what betrayal does when you face it with intention. It gives you vision. You see through people faster. You listen beyond words. You walk into rooms no longer needing validation because you've already validated yourself through the storm. You stop looking for safety in others, and you started becoming your own shelter. That shift is what makes you untouchable. Not harder, but wiser. You don't owe the past anything but your growth. You don't owe explanations to those who watched you bleed and walked away. You don't need to fix the narrative. You don't need to be understood by the very ones who chose to misunderstand you. Let them live with their choices. Let them wear the weight of their silence. Because while they were calculating your fall, they underestimated your resilience. And now you're here, not just surviving, but stepping into a version of yourself they're no longer qualified to meet. You are no longer available for shallow loyalty. No longer impressed by proximity. No longer swayed by empty words. What you crave now is alignment, loyalty without conditions, respect without begging, presence without pretense. Because betrayal taught you that most people love convenience, not connection, and now you've outgrown convenience. You've become intentional, you've become selective. You've turned the pain into a filter, and through it, everything that was never real has been removed. This is your power built in silence, refined in solitude, sharpened through clarity. You didn't need revenge, you needed revelation. And now that you see clearly, you walk differently. You speak less, you trust slower, but you love deeper because now it's real. It's earned, it's sacred, and only those who respect that space are allowed near it. Let this version of you lead, the one who's no longer ashamed of what happened, but fueled by it. The one who no longer breaks when something ends because they know what begins after loss is always stronger. Keep rising, even if it makes others uncomfortable, especially then, because their discomfort is just a sign that you've stepped into a level they were never meant to follow. And from here, you don't look back. You lead forward, with vision, with fire, and with a peace they can't touch.